Hi everybody, I'm Brian Dempster and I'm here today to talk to you about combining people and technology to deliver the best quality trial documentation for your clinical trial. So in way of introduction, as I said, my name is Brian. I'm the Senior Director for Global Clinical Management here at Axiom Real-Time Metrics, and Global Clinical Management also incorporates our ETMF group. I have over 25 years of experience in the industry, much of it on the sponsor side, but also now on the full service provider side. I've managed teams globally, and in the last 7 to 8 years, I've really centered my efforts on better documentation within clinical trials and used my previous experience to deliver good quality TMF, including TMF transitions from paper and other systems into Axiom Real-Time Metrics ETMF system. So a little bit about Axiom. This is our 20th anniversary this year. We've been in the industry for the 20 years, providing EDC and a full range of other full service provision, including clinical management, and of course, within the Fusion system, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, we also have an ETMF provision. Okay, so when we're talking about clinical trial documentation and ETMF in particular, we really need to think about the old adage that failing to prepare is really preparing to fail. And that's a big problem that we see with TMFs, is that not enough effort is put in and not enough thought is actually put in at the beginning of the process to ensure quality deliverables at the end. Why is that? Well, one of the main reasons that we fail at the end of ETMF provision is really because we don't start with a good plan in mind. And it really is essential to begin your TMF preparation with a fully thought out clinical trial master file plan. Within that plan, you also have to think about documentation and good documentation practice being more than just collecting the actual physical documents. You also have to think about how that plan incorporates the quality of those documents, the checking of that quality, and also how you associate metadata to those documents so that you can pinpoint those documents and the quality of those documents at any given time, but obviously, most importantly, at the end of the trial. So this is what we're trying to avoid when the regulators come in and you've collected a number of documents within your clinical trial, but you have no real quality oversight over those documents and no real organizational structure to how those documents tell the story of your clinical trial execution. If we start by thinking about the typical TMF life cycle, there's obviously a bolus of information that's collected at the beginning of a trial in terms of operational and documentation information, and also then at the end. And this is by no means what we're aspiring to, but this tends to be the typical life cycle that we see in the industry. So a lot of activity at the beginning with documentation is created, followed by a lull in documentation being collected, and then at the end, a rush to ensure that the trial is accurately reflected in the documentation. This doesn't give a contemporary feel to the clinical trial, and that is an increasing problem with inspections. In fact, the number one item for inspection findings is around documentation, and it's particularly around whether or not that documentation reflects the actual activities at the time they were taking place. To put that into some kind of context, let's think about this in a very basic level. If I were to ask you what you were doing at 9 a.m. this morning, I'm pretty sure that you'd be able to give me a good, accurate, and detailed breakdown of the activities that you were participating in. However, if I change that question to what were you doing at 9 a.m. September 27th, 5 years ago, the recollection of information becomes significantly more difficult. And the quality that can be placed on that recollection is also of a much inferior quality. And so that is reflective also in ETMF documentation collection. Contemporaneous documentation collection always implies a quality that retrospective document collection doesn't. So we're starting with the end in mind. We're thinking about what we want our TMF to look like when we're faced with submissions and how that TMF will tell the accurate story of our clinical trial. The FDA have a specific idea about what a TMF function is, and it's quite wordy. I've taken this, you can see, from CFR Part 21, Title 21, Part 11, I beg your pardon, and you can see that they have specific areas that they are looking for when they're inspecting a TMF. Really, they want to see that your trial master file is an accurate reflection of what actually occurred during the clinical study, that it tells the story accurately of what occurred during your clinical study. One way of ensuring that you meet all of the points that the CFR is alluding to is to follow Alcoa C. So any clinical trial that you are creating a TMF for, you really, at the beginning, you really want to think about how you're going to obtain Alcoa C good documentation practice standards to your documents. This means they have to be attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate. And the C comes to making sure that if all of these things are in place, that your TMF is complete. And that's a very important thing that was previously overlooked. Even if you attained all of these attributes, did you make sure that all of the documentation that you expected to have at the beginning of the study was actually there at the end? To go a stage further, to really ensure that you're going to meet the standards that regulators are expecting, you need to apply the condition of Rutola to your Alcoa C plan as well. And we see here this means the documents have to be retrievable, unique, translations have to be in place, documents have to be proven to be original and legible, and of course applicable as well. So in order to meet those standards, it really is important, as we alluded to early on, to have a plan at the beginning of your trial and to then use that as your map, as your roadmap to ensuring quality TMF throughout. The place to start is obviously with the TMF quality group reference model, which we're now at version 3.2, but earlier versions will equally be successful in meeting the standards that you require. From that reference model, you want to make sure that you have a map which relates to your specific study. So you want to ensure that you have made provision to collect documents that you know you're going to generate within your study. You want to be able to say at the outset that there are documents that you may not or will not collect, and that way you don't end up with that incomplete appearance of a TMF at the end of the study, because you've already ascertained what documents are going to be in your trial before you've collected a single document. The next piece in the process, and this really is a sequential process, is to ensure that roles and responsibilities are well mapped out as well. So to each document, you're going to have to attribute a contributor. You're going to know the role that is going to provide that document into the TMF. And then you have to have owners over each zone of the TMF map and the TMF reference model to ensure that those contributors are adhering to the expectations that are laid out in those things. Milestones ensures the contemporaneous nature of your TMF. So within your TMF model, you don't want to know just which documents you're going to collect, but you also want to know which point in the trial that those documents will be collected. And that's extremely important, of course, in ensuring that quality that we talked about earlier on when we said, what were you doing 5 years ago? If you know when you're collecting a document, which documents and when, then you can ensure that that document is in the TMF at that right time, that the quality of that document is assured at that time, and then at the end of the study or at any point beyond, you can make sure then that you satisfy yourself that the document is an accurate reflection of the activity that was occurring at the time it was loaded into the TMF. And of course, all of this is only successful if you can measure your journey against the plan that you've put these attributes to. So without the ability to see where you are in relation to the plan at any point, then you really are going to get to the end of the study and realize that you had a great plan, but you weren't able to measure your ability to stick to it. So reporting of metrics into the TMF is critically important. We'll talk a little bit about ways that that can be done as we go forward. So technology and people we've already seen within the plan, within this presentation. The people piece is really the contributor and the owners, and the technology is really about how you can load documents into specific areas and how you can ensure that those documents are expected in those areas, and how you can go back and measure whether or not documents are there and the quality of those documents. So a big advantage in the industry of recent years is the move to electronic trial master file, so eTMF from the traditional paper-based TMF. This is the MHRA's view on the subject, and as you can see, they clearly identify a lot of advantages that eTMF brings over the traditional approach to paper TMF. So it really is now seen within the industry, led by the regulators, that eTMF is the gold standard. The technology is provided by the eTMF, but the people aspect that we're talking about is really how that technology is used and brought to success. So within the TMF, you have to, again, we talked about the contributors being critically important. So identifying within your map who will be responsible for the provision of specific documents within the TMF. Zone ownership ensures that those contributors understand their responsibilities and are held accountable to that responsibility. And then vitally important and quite often overlooked is that executive ownership piece. So in addition to the individual zone owners, you also have to think about who is your entire TMF owner, who is ensuring that the health of the overall TMF is where you expect it to be at any given point within the process. And that person needs to have access into metrics across the entire TMF upload, the entire TMF quality, and really understand where to make decisions to ensure that your TMF is contemporary and of the quality you expect. So within the Fusion system, we are able to accomplish all of these goals by ensuring that we have a system that can receive documents via many different formats, so direct upload or into a holding station, which via email, and then uploaded via a document specialist here at Axiom. The important piece being that we have a system that can receive documents at any point via multiple different sources, which are established within your clinical trial plan. The second piece of the important part of that system is the ability to then see where the health of your TMF is at any given point, and that's the metric piece we talked about. So being able to identify at an executive level and then at a specific zone level and even down to an individual contributor level as to what documents are expected, when they're expected, whether they've been uploaded, and whether the quality of those documents is sufficient. You can see here that this is a dashboard example that's taken from the Fusion system that shows the expected number of documents, those documents uploaded, and those documents that have already passed review. That's an important piece. If you look at the right-hand side showing the document status, you can see that once the documents enter that green portion of the pie chart, they are, to all intents and purposes, complete until the end of the study and beyond. So that means that as you go through your clinical trial, you can ensure what percentage that your trial master file is complete already. And that means that there's none of that rush to the end where you're scrabbling to ensure quality or completeness, because you're able to see that as you go through the trial where that complete and quality piece is already in place. Another important aspect is showing in the blue area, it shows where the work still remains to be done for documents that have already been uploaded, where that review and that quality check is taking place. And again, significant importance is where quality is a non-acceptable standard. That does occur. What's important is being able to identify that in real time and see patterns in that. Is it that the quality of the document is not sufficient because the contributor is not assigning the correct metadata, or is it because the documents themselves are not of sufficient quality? It means that you can focus on those areas in real time and correct them so that those problems can be identified and resolved immediately without remedial action of a grand nature at the end of a study. And again, just looking from an individual contributor level, an individual contributor of documents can look to see what documents are expected at any given time and what documents may have already expired within the TMF and need to be collected on the next monitoring visit, for example, or even sooner than that. But it's important to note that all of the documents have milestones associated with them, and therefore the contemporary nature of the TMF is assured, along with the quality nature, which we just talked about in the previous slide. So Fusion has a couple of advantages that I'd like to just talk about in terms of TMF, because it's more than just a TMF system. Fusion is an integrated eClinical suite with a single point of contact. You can, excuse me, you can select specific modules. So you can just use Fusion as an eTMF repository and quality system, or you can combine that system with any one of the other 14 modules that exist within the Fusion eClinical suite, right from EDC all the way through to eTMF at the end, and all of the components that you need in between. In addition to the technology that we offer, we of course also offer the people component, because as good a tool as Fusion is, it's really only as good, like any tool, as the people who operate it. And we have the expertise within Axiom to ensure that Fusion is applied to your clinical study in the most productive, efficient, and effective way. The single point of entry to Fusion, the single logon, means that there's no requirement to have clinical study document contributors logging onto various systems. They simply enter Fusion, and EDC, RTSM, data management, and all those other components are accessible from a single point of login, including the eTMF module. So documents can be uploaded at the point of entry. It also means that document can be directly set to be entered from areas where the generated within the system. So for example, monitoring visit reports, which are generated within Fusion, are automatically uploaded to the eTMF at the point of finalization, ensuring that as soon as a monitoring visit report is finalized, it will be present in the trial master file, date stamped and quality assured. Again, to make the point about metrics, the advantage of having all of your operational data alongside your clinical data in one single platform means that metrics can be pulled across those different components of your study so that you have a real-time snapshot into what's actually occurring on your trial. And again, to make sure this piece, to bring it all together, Axiom is more than just the Fusion system, although that is obviously our massive advantage. But within that, we also have the expertise to use that system to bring to you the best possible standard of clinical trial management. So I'd like to thank you all for listening to my presentation today on bringing technology and people together to provide the best quality clinical trial documentation. And I'll be around now for the Q&A session and would enjoy any questions that you have. Thanks so much.